Minecraft Beta lends itself more to simplicity than newer versions of the game. You have less blocks to choose from, and because of the older and more vibrant graphics and textures, simple designs look way better in Beta than they would in a modern version. You may prefer this style, but in this video we're going to see if modern building techniques hold up in one of the oldest versions of Minecraft. Let's get right into it. Despite not having as many blocks to choose from, you can still use them to make complex patterns and colors. It is more than essential to choose the right colors for your builds and to keep treating blocks as colors rather than individual materials. I have another video that covers this more in depth, but long story short, you want to forget about individual blocks and instead combine several different kinds of blocks to create a color or material. Look up a picture of whatever real-life structure you're trying to create and treat individual blocks as colors that you can combine to emulate what you see in the real world. Looking at pictures of real castles, you can see that the stone is not all one color. It starts very dark and damp near the bottom and gradually gets lighter towards the top, or darker depending on how ruined or top heavy it is. The moss and vines growing up the side fundamentally change the color of the stone in certain areas. If we want to recreate this in Minecraft, we'll take our limited block selection and sort out all the gray colors from dark to light. This is a gradient, and we can use it to create gradual changes in color moving upward along a build to make it more dynamic and realistic. Generally, dark to light gradients are a good go-to option because they draw the viewer's eyes upwards and are pretty easy to build. Of course, like any structure, a castle is rarely only one color. Some structures will have very strong accent colors that contrast greatly with their base colors. Others, like medieval style castles, will generally have a lot less variation. Looking at some of these real-life examples, we'll want to accent our base color of stone with some reddish brownish earth-toned roofing. If you want a more fantastical build, you can use brighter, more vivid colors. It's very important to consider that in beta, you have a height limit of only 128 blocks, leaving about 64 blocks of space above sea level. Your builds are going to have to spread laterally outward rather than upward, so be sure to plan accordingly and make sure the tallest points in your build will fit within this limit before you start building. I cannot tell you how many times I've started a build, finished almost all of it just before realizing that the very top is completely cut off. Build the tallest parts of your building first, or at the very least measure everything before you start building. Scale will also determine the complexity of the color palette you'll be using. A taller build can have more layers of different blocks while still looking natural, while using too many colors in a shorter build can make it look like a layered cake. Larger builds will also need much more variation and deliberation in color placement in order to break up some of the larger empty faces. Flat walls are a pain to look at even if they are colored well. By offsetting parts of your build by even 1 or 2 blocks, you can make them much more dynamic and create points of focus. Creating indents into your walls, overhangs, protruding supports, and even offsetting your windows 1 block into the wall can make a huge difference. Painters almost never paint in one dimension. They almost always create overlapping layers of foreground and background to give their art depth. Do the same with any structure you create. You can also create natural focal points through changes in elevation like you see in real-world structures. Having a build get taller towards the center can make it feel more grand. Look at a city's skyline, for example. Your eyes are naturally drawn inwards towards the tallest points. People are going to focus the most on the tallest points in your build, so use this to your advantage to direct their attention to the right places. Adding detail to a build is immensely challenging in beta for the sole reason that you do not have functional stairs, slabs, fences, trapdoors, or any of the smaller than full block items that you do in later versions. These blocks can often only be oriented upwards, are very finicky to place, or have very few color options to choose from. As a result, you'll need to do most of your detailing with full blocks. Finer details may be hard to achieve, but by the same token, using full blocks does make your life a lot easier. Focus on simple, larger shapes and use what you have. Like I covered in my previous video, good coloring can often make up for lack of detail. If you color your builds right, you'll have to do a lot less work in actual detailing. Now let's apply these principles in game. For our first challenge, we'll be making a yellow house. This will be challenging because we only have 2 yellow blocks to work with. Sponge doesn't count. To make this work, we'll start with a basic yellow structure with a sandstone accent. We'll add roofing that slopes inwards towards the tallest points and fill them in with colors that are more and less vibrant than the sandstone and yellow respectively. Now we add detail through color. The clay and wool look like worn paint on a cobblestone wall, and the golden sand added to the yellow side look like yellow paint that is either gone smooth or worn away entirely. We'll add color to the roofing as well, mixing in more gray tones and adding darker red note blocks to convey that the brick roof is made of rectangular tiles. Lastly, we'll add some detail. Some oak fences for supports, trapdoors for window shutters, and buttons for cobblestones bring the whole build together. We can also use ladders to overlap with the yellow to give it a more worn brown color. I still don't like the color yellow, but this house still turned out pretty nice. For the next challenge, we'll be building a colorful castle keep. We'll start with the basic layout. It's essentially just a random collections of rectangles and circles with a larger tower in the center. We'll build it up with the cobblestone to sandstone gradient to make it look like the lower parts are worn away, but leaving the top parts looking fresh and relatively well maintained. We'll use red to create contrast between the roof and walls and color it with a similar dark to light gradient using netherrack and bricks. While we're figuring out where to place the windows, we'll add a wooden trim to the roofing using fences and slabs. I also tried adding some redstone torches to the roof, which looks good sometimes. I just didn't like it here, so I removed them and added normal torches to the fence posts instead. To finish up, we'll add some cobblestones like we did earlier and some signs under the windows, and I think it looks pretty good so far. This castle is very similar, but expanded a little bit more. You can see I added a castle gate and an actual section of wall here that curves around. I also extended some of the fence posts a few blocks down just to give it a little bit more variation in height, and of course some supports up against the wall make it look like a bit more of a realistic structure. This castle was expanded even more, making use of much different shapes, but adding variation to the shapes you use can make a huge difference in a build like this. There's certain sections that are diagonal, round, square. There's about 4 or 5 layers of buildings going into this castle here that really brings it together. I think my main takeaway here is that you can build in Minecraft beta like you would in a modern version. I enjoyed the challenge, but I feel like it kind of takes away from the classic, simple style of gameplay that draws people to these older versions of Minecraft in the first place. All things considered, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.